enlightened activity of all the 3 times Buddhas, past, present, and future. And then imagine that together with us, gazing up towards Tara, are all the 6 types of sentient beings, but in the aspects of humans, with our mother and father of this life at either side of us at the front. Imagine that all the sentient beings in human aspects are complete in all 6 sense faculties, complete in intelligence, and with a mind of faith, go for refuge to Venerable Mother Tārā. And as we go for refuge together with this vast assembly of sentient beings, think that all of these beings surrounding me have at one time been connected to me, and cultivate the feeling for this vast assembly of beings, the same feeling that you have for the person who is closest to you in this life. Bring forth the mind of bodhicitta thinking, I'm going to lead this vast assembly of 6 types of beings to the perfect and complete state of enlightenment. For this purpose, may I achieve the state of Mother Tārā. In order to do that, I must follow a complete and unmistaken path. And to reach the end of that path, I must bring forth wisdom. Think from Venerable Mother Tārā that we visualized in the space in front. Due to our minds of refuge and bodhicitta, she takes upon the aspect of being pleased with us. Lights and nectars emanate from her heart and fall like rain upon the vast assembly of sentient beings, completely clearing away, completely dispelling all of their mental and physical suffering. Okay, so let us begin the session. So we'll begin with the praise to the Buddha. You'll find that for folks here at the just very beginning of the booklet. Tumba chom den de jin je ba dra chom ba yan da bar zo be sang je ba dang shab su dem ba de war she ba jiten kem ba ke bu du we kalo gyurwa la na me ba la da mi nam gi tumba song ge chom den de be gya wa sha gya tu ba la cha ze lo che de gyab su ji ho Temba chom den de jin she ba dra chom ba yang da ba zo be song ge je ba dang shab su dem ba de wa she ba je den chen ba che bu de we ka lo ju rwa la na me ba la da mi nam gi temba song ge chom den de pe ja wa sha kya tu ba la cha se lo che de gyab zu ji ho temba chom den de jin che ba dra chom ba yang da ba zo be song ge je ba dang shab su dem ba de wa she ba ji den chen ba che bu de we ka lo ju rwa la na me ba la da mi nam gi temba song ge chom den de pe ja wa sha kya tu ba la cha se lo che de kyab su ji ho. Mandala offering. So ji pe gi jo shing me do jam ri rab ling ji ni de gem ba di song ye jin du me te bu wa yi jo kun hama da jin la che bar jo idam guru ratna mendala kam niryatayami. So we'll finish with the refuge and bodhicitta prayer, and you will find the refuge and bodhicitta prayer on page 23. That's okay. Chedan sogi chenam la jangshu bardu dani kyab su chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi jola penjir sangye drubar sho Chedan sogi chenam la jangshu bardu dani kyab su chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi Jola penjir sangye drubar sho
Chedan sogi chenam lai janshu bardu dani gyabsu chi dagi chenyen gibe sunam gi jola penchir sange jo parisho.
So we began with the visualization, so now it's easy to continue with the teaching. So one of the things you'll find with deity yoga or deity practice is whatever the class of Tantra, for example, highest yoga or Kriya Tantra, there are actually a lot of similarities. So at the beginning, for example, you have the practices that we just did of refuge and bodhicitta, and then you have this practice which is known as extraordinary or exceptional bodhicitta. Extraordinary or exceptional bodhicitta is something you'll only find within the context of Tantra. So Geshe said one of the things also with these practices is people have different sadhanas or different texts that they like to use. So Geshe is going to go through the sequence of the sadhana rather than an actual sadhana. By going through this sequence, whatever sadhana you're using at home, it should be applicable to that. And so then in terms of the sadhana that Geshe is going to be using himself, that he uses, it's actually only 2 pages long. But within those 2 pages are many very kind of important and precious meanings. So one of the important things to understand is the meaning of this word. In English, we often use the word sadhana, but sadhana in Tibetan is druptap. So both the Sanskrit and the Tibetan have this sense of method of accomplishment. So Geshe said if the sadhana is the method of accomplishment, we need to know the path of practice of that particular deity. Because even if we have a lot of faith or feeling for the particular deity, without understanding the path of practice, we won't be able to get very far. And so any Tantra practice that we speak about, one of its kind of cornerstones is this practice of bodhicitta that is rooted in love and compassion. And without this bodhicitta rooted in love and compassion, the practice is not complete. And so actually, whether a tantric practice becomes an actual practice of Buddhist Tantra can be determined by the presence or lack thereof of this mind of bodhicitta, love and compassion. And then, as we mentioned, there is also an uncommon or extraordinary bodhicitta that is cultivated here. And so then along with those practices of bodhicitta and so forth, which are the practices of the method side, right, we also have the practices of the wisdom side. And we know that there are different types of wisdom, some more coarse, some more subtle. This is the subtle type of wisdom which is directly realizing the ultimate view of emptiness. And one of the things that Tantra practice gives you is an access to the extremely subtle mind so that it can be used to realize emptiness. And this is something that you won't find in the sutra or the common path. So we really, if we want to come to profit from our practice of Tantra, we need to have an understanding of these foundations of bodhicitta and emptiness, and without those, actually, we won't be able to come to much progress. With bodhicitta and emptiness, then our deity yoga practice of arising as the yidam, of the extraordinary methods of making the offerings and so forth, this will all come out beautifully. But it will not in the absence of that. And in addition to the subtle mind, it bears mentioning that Tantra also gives us access to the extremely subtle wind, also known as prana. But to be able to master the winds, the subtle mind, and the practices of deity yoga and so forth, bodhicitta and emptiness must absolutely be in place. Shotrang karides la shotambo. Sumshi so dun ngala la kare tisek. Ale loso dachi gone tadare.
Chaso malula.
Loso.
Oh ya, ta chandro te kon.
Chamjo tama ere sangye chodang chogi chonamla janchu
ta na telu jan de gwa suje je do suje chonola suje pa de telu jan de gwa te malo da ge so jibe so nan dola pe so jin de ba sho.
So the practice begins with going for refuge, and the refuge in the Tara sadhana goes something like this. I go for refuge to the kind root and lineage gurus, to the Buddhas, to the Dharma, and to the supreme community, the Sangha.
Oh, da te jing de so ma. Oh ya. 다 델레서 생제토지 되고 그래서 생제토지 되고 대유제도 되면 생제토지 되면 명함에다 생제토지 내리 저든지도 다 돈녀라니 봐 제지 세메지 거 봐.
상계주 소만 로마송 상계주 소만.
that's
And then you have the refuge in bodhicitta prayer, just like what we recited at the beginning of the class. And then you come to the practice of the four immeasurables.
Okay, 다 거면 되게 윤전되기.
상기초는 소기초는 라마송 라마송. So I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly until enlightenment. Through my practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha for the benefit of all. And so next we come to the practice of the four immeasurables, and we say, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be separated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from happiness beyond suffering, and may they always abide in equanimity, in a state of equanimity free from attachment and aversion. So the practice of the four immeasurables, or the four boundless thoughts, is actually a reinforcing practice for our bodhicitta. We can look at this meditation as like putting water or fertilizer upon the seed that we want to grow of bodhicitta. And so the explanation of the four immeasurables, probably most of you are familiar with. But when we speak about immeasurable equanimity, this is something that can be explained a little bit differently in different places. So normally when we think about the immeasurable or boundless thought of equanimity, it comes from a place of understanding that so many of the problems that we experience between countries in the world, that we experience in our workplace, that we experience in our family units and so forth, all of these can be kind of traced back to these mistaken minds of attachment to some and aversion for others. So this is praying, may I be separated from that attachment and aversion, and may I abide in a state of equanimity. How wonderful if all beings could abide in a state of equanimity. That's the common practice. And you know, this is something that is really clear, the importance of equanimity when we look at the state of our world right now with the wars, the conflicts, the various illnesses, the environmental degradation, all of that, right? Equanimity is so important. And it's also said that when we bring forth equanimity in our mind, this is also a practice of the paramita of generosity. So the next type of equanimity, which is an equanimity that we don't hear about as often, but is mentioned in the text, is the equanimity of thinking the 8 worldly dharmas, name, fame, loss, gain, and so forth. These are the source of so many problems in the world. May beings abide in a state of equanimity, completely separated from these 8 worldly concerns. And there's a third one that you hardly hear about, but that Geshe also wants to mention. And this is based on an understanding of the root and branch afflictions, thinking the root and branch afflictions are the cause of all of these problems. May beings abide in a state of equanimity separated from these root and branch afflictions. How wonderful if they could all abide in such an equanimity. And there's also a way to fuse this practice of the 4 measurables with wisdom, thinking that all of the problems that sentient beings experience within samsara, indeed the main factor which keeps them circling within samsara or cyclic existence, is their lack of understanding of emptiness, the nature of reality. May they understand emptiness. How wonderful if all beings understood emptiness. So this is a way to kind of enrich this practice of this final immeasurable practice of equanimity and different ways to think about it. So it's very important. And with the practice of the immeasurable thoughts and bodhicitta, another important thing to understand, right, is that this practice of bodhicitta and this practice of compassion is something that if we build it, it will be accessible anywhere. And we think about one of the previous lifetimes of the Buddha before his enlightenment, he was in the hell realm. Right? From seeing one of his companions in that realm suffering terribly, he brought forth a sort of unbearable compassion within his mind. And not only did that unbearable compassion benefit his companion, but that unbearable compassion benefited him because it purified his negativities and he was able to quickly exit that realm. So it bears mentioning this particular point because, of course, love and compassion have as their reference others, right? But meditating on love and compassion and actually getting to a point where our practice, our personal practice of love and compassion benefits others, that can actually be quite a gap. Right? It can actually take some time. But if we understand it in this way, we see that the more we develop within that mind, actually it benefits us too in terms of that mental purification and drawing closer to realization. And you'll also remember the very famous story of Arya Asanga, right, who was in a 12-year meditation retreat. He wasn't able to see his deity Maitreya, but in the last part of the story he came across a dog with a terrible infested wound, and he used his own body to remove that suffering, and from that unbearable compassion meditation, he actually purified tremendous negative karma within his mind, and he was instantaneously able to see Maitreya. So it's important that we have this understanding in our mind that actually the practices of love and compassion are also tremendous sources of mental purification. So now we come to the exceptional or the extraordinary bodhicitta. And so this extraordinary bodhicitta is phrased something like this: for the sake of all my mother sentient beings, I must swiftly reach the state of complete Buddhahood. For this purpose, I will engage in the practices of meditation and recitation of Venerable Arya Tārā. And so initially this might seem something that's kind of difficult to fathom, but we can see that previously, however much we've cultivated that feeling of being close to all sentient beings, then it gets easier. And so it's also important to understand when we say I must reach the state of Buddhahood quickly, that means hopefully to be able to reach it in this particular lifetime. So that sense of urgency is a feature of this exceptional bodhicitta. And also here thinking, I'm one person abiding in samsara, so perhaps that's not much of a problem. But there are countless sentient beings enduring even worse sufferings in samsara. So it is for their sake that I must quickly reach the state of complete enlightenment. And so these practices of going for refuge, bodhicitta, the four immeasurables, and this extraordinary or exceptional bodhicitta, these are the four preliminaries to the Tārā practice. And so now we come to the explanation of the self-generation. And as was stated, this is for those who have received full empowerment. But if you have not received full empowerment, you can do different kind of adaptations like the front and on the crown. So Om Sobhava Shuddha Sarvadhamma Sobhava Shuddho Ham. Everything becomes emptiness. So when we meditate Om Sobhava Shuddha Sarvadhamma Sobhava Shuddho Hang, we should recollect that emptiness actually has sort of two aspects to it. The selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. In other words, all other things that are not persons. And why do we have to recollect emptiness here? This is very important because when we do the self-generation, we can't superimpose the self-generation of the deity on top of our ordinary body. We have to first dissolve this ordinary or contaminated body. It's like if you wanted to build a new house, right? You couldn't build a new house on top of the old one. First, you'd have to tear down the old house, cart all of the rubbish away, and then you could start from the beginning. And so then, really here, especially in the context of the self-generation, thinking about the emptiness of oneself, and also one's physical form, one's body, right? This is very important. And so then from this emptiness, right, which we can sort of conceptualize visually as a space of absence, a vacuum, an empty space, from that space of emptiness, the first thing that arises is the syllable pam. Yeah. So this may be hard to kind of conceptualize visually. So Geshe encourages you to think about it's the old style of TV, which when you turn off the television, everything dissolves until there's just that one tiny dot, that pixel in the middle, and then that goes away. Arising is the same. So when you first turn on the television set, that first tiny little pixel arises and everything comes from that. That's what this palm is like. So then one thinks, right? First one dissolves one's ordinary body, like that image kind of dissolving in the TV screen, one's head, one's arms, and so forth, that these completely sort of dissolve. And then you have just that space of emptiness. Then from within that space of emptiness, right, the mind contemplating emptiness has the physical aspect of this letter Pam, and then from Pam, the lotus and so forth arise. And then from within this lotus, there is a letter A that appears. So just for a general kind of understanding, we can see that the letter Pam, the letter A, and so forth, we can understand that this is a physical representation of our mind that is focused single-pointedly on emptiness. And then from that A, there arises a beautiful moon disk. And then we think that upon that moon disk is one's mind in the aspect of a green letter Tam, which is the seed syllable of Tārā. Yeah. So this is Tāra's seed syllable, but every deity has its seed syllable, right? Just like you have pear seeds, apple seeds, or orange seeds, it's a little bit like that. So the seed syllable for Tārā is this Tam. So once again we say, like, well, what is manifesting this Tam, or where is this Tam coming from? It's from one's mind single-pointedly contemplating emptiness. That brings forth this physical aspect of the green letter Tam. And we think that this Tam is powerful because its source is that mind that has seen emptiness directly. And from this powerful letter Tam, lights radiate that can accomplish different activities. So we can think that the lights that emanate from this letter Tam, they go into the 10 directions and they penetrate every last place of this vast realm of samsara, and they purify all of those physical environments of samsara into pure lands, and they transform all of the inhabitants of samsara into the state of Venerable Tārā. And we think that as those light rays touch sentient beings, the help that they bestow is instantaneous. So it's almost like that experience of, like, with the really hot days that we had recently, when a gentle breeze manifests, there's an instantaneous relief. So it functions like that. So all of their mental and physical difficulties, problems are completely cleared away. And subsequent to that, every last one of these sentient beings transforms into Tārā. And again, Tam Lamatim. And then once that's been accomplished, all of those light rays and nectars dissolve back into the letter Tam. So we think that that tam, which was powerful before because of this mind of bodhicitta and emptiness, from it manifesting those light rays that benefited all of those sentient beings, its merit, its virtue is exponentially more powerful. Then just Roma So those light rays dissolve back into the tam. It's empowered through accomplishing those meritorious activities, and once again light rays emanate. And this time, the light rays, when they go out, they go to the realms of the holy beings, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and they fill the sky with offerings to those holy beings, both excelled and unexcelled offerings, completely filling the sky. And so when you're doing this visualization, don't kind of think, really? Come off it. Because it's actually this visualization and this transformation of the offerings that makes Tantra so powerful, right? Because we can accomplish these vast kind of offerings. Yeah. So many kind of great yogis and yoginis who reached realization in the past, it was actually through this practice of Tantra, by visualizing liberating all those sentient beings, and by visualizing making offerings to all of those holy beings, that they were able to accumulate vast merit very, very quickly. So they say that, with Tantra in one lifetime, you can accumulate the equivalent of 3 eons of virtues. So then you think, well, how do I accumulate 3 eons of merit in one lifetime, as it says in Tantra? Well, it's through practices like this. And so then, once those letters absorb back into the letter tam, after that second activity, then one arises in the form of Venerable Kadaravani Tārā, green in color. So I just want to so just asking. So Kadaravani actually means acacia forest. So this Tārā is called the Tārā of the acacia forest. So that's what Kadaravani means. Let's again. So Tāra's holy form shows us that she can accomplish whatever is needed to assist in sentient beings, right? And the green color is the color of activities, but it is also the color of these acacia groves, right, which provide cool from the heat. And also, as one comes to further explanation, the green color of Arya Tārā also kind of connects her with one of the 5 families of the Buddha, Dundrupro. Yeah, with Akshobhya Buddha. And also one of Tāra's exceptional qualities is that she can bless our chakras, right, our energy channels, and our lung or our prana, our winds, in a way that other deities cannot. So for those of you who have received the full empowerment, it's at this point in the self-generation that it's really important to have the conviction that that I call the I, or that I call the self, has truly transformed into the state of Arya Tārā. But Geshe said, if you haven't received a full empowerment, you don't need to feel that you're left out of these practices, because you can do the visualization of a Tārā at your heart, you can do a visualization of the Tārā at your crown, accomplishing those activities, or you can do it on the basis of a front generation, a Tārā visualized in front. Yes, so keep that in mind to adjust according to your situation. That's important. But in terms of the dissolution and the emptiness and so forth, you're going to meditate on this in the same way, regardless of the empowerment that you've received. Yeah. And so then she has one face and two arms. So the right hand is in the gesture of generosity, or also giving protection. And her left hand, it holds the stem of an utpala flower between the thumb and ring finger. And so her holding that stem and then the flower sort of blossoming at about the level of her ear, this represents that she is taking beings from all of the realms of samsara and leading them to the state of supreme liberation, enlightenment. And she is adorned with heavenly garments and beautiful jeweled ornaments. She's in a half posture with one foot slightly out. So all of these are the details of arising as the deity. And so actually here Geshe is not sure how much time we have to go into each of these, but it's at this moment where the practitioner can meditate on the 6 deities according to Kriya, or action tantra. And so then okay, and so then within where we've gotten to so far, we could say that we've touched on 2 of these 6, but the other 4 we haven't covered. And so Geshe said that tomorrow, if there's time, he will give more detail about these 6 deities. And so these 6 are the deity of emptiness. We actually covered that a little bit with the meditation we did. Then the deity of sound. Then the deity of syllables. We talked about that a little bit also. The deity of form. The deity of mudras. And the deity of signs. And so actually these 6 deities, right, they're not actually deities in the normal sense, but they're the 6 practices. So what is the function of these 6 practices? It's to help you develop concentration on the aspect of yourself as the deity, as well as divine pride. That's the purpose of those practices. And so, for all the different Kriya deities, having an idea of these 6 is very important. And so now the next one is blessing the body, speech, and mind, right? And if one has kind of arisen as the deity, one can also see this as blessing oneself. So dagke di jinlap nangyer, right? Yeah, so Geshe is pointing to something, and it's something that's kind of difficult in English because they have different words for body, speech, and mind, depending on if you're talking about an ordinary being or an enlightened being. So Geshe is just differentiating that our ordinary body, speech, and mind that we possess now, that's different from the holy body, holy speech, and holy mind that beings like Mother Tārā possess. And so to bless the holy body, speech, and mind, this is actually quite simple. It's done visualizing 3 syllables, an at the crown, an a at the throat, and a hum at the heart. And so why do we visualize this? Because our arising in the self-generation is Mother Tārā. We want to kind of stabilize that aspect of ourselves as Tārā and that concentration. And this is achieved by blessing body, speech, and mind with Om, Ah, Hum.
ane dashi ane dashi rawa da lashiwa ane kusutu shinji laba ne the true sono dona bedu de waras was.
So Geshe said that actually you can practice Tārā even without a sadhana, if you know what the essential points are. So what do you think the essential points are? There's 6 in number. So the first is refuge, the second is bodhicitta, the third is the 4 immeasurable thoughts, the fourth is the extraordinary bodhicitta, the fifth is the practice of the self-generation of oneself as Tārā, and the sixth is the blessing through these 3 syllables of holy body, holy speech, and holy mind. That in itself is a complete practice. And we can apply kare chagyugi, and we can apply these principles actually to any self-generation practice, in particular any self-generation practice of Kriya Tantra.
Oh, ta dumba tere so ta dumba tere nge dun jewa jasa te kanri. Oh yeah, ta de da.
Did nganso the yeah.
Ta judo ma ja.
Loso.
Oh yeah, ta ishi ba she to ya she chungwa sa ji wa res yo.
And so then the next part that we can do, which is an auxiliary practice, is the inviting of the wisdom beings. We can think about the inviting of the wisdom beings.
Oh, ishi ba she chungni te tane to ji ba lang gju ji ni sha wa.
And so we invite the wisdom beings, then they come to the crown, and then they absorb and eventually become inseparable of the commitment being, which we've already generated.
Oh, ta ji zo ma ge ne chi chen zo mo le yo si ten da ta ji ge ne koro ishi ro no le te ta.
Potala.
Potala ji wa res.
So when we do this practice, we imagine that oneself as Tārā, or at the crown or whatever, that this Tārā, she invites from the Pure Land, from the abode of Potala, all of the wisdom beings in the aspect of Venerable Tārā to appear.
Oh, that so target, constitution you love to come was, won't tell you geze, churchill tinita, ne Potala party, Potala ita, domigata, Mombo, Pachawaba Muji, that's it in the shed.
So there's a visualization that you can do here when you invite the wisdom beings. And so remember that when we were stabilizing ourselves as Tārā, we had the Om, Ah, and the Hum at the heart. At this point, the Hum at the heart of oneself as Tārā emanates light rays that go to the 10 directions, inviting all of the wisdom beings, the enlightened beings, of all of the realms, especially Potala, in the aspect of Venerable Tārā. These Tāras sort of arrive, coming in space, and then they fall like a rain onto our self-generation of Tārā, absorbing into the holy body. And so another way to do this is you can have a Tārā as a front generation. All of the wisdom beings dissolve into her as the commitment being, and then she as the commitment being single dissolves into oneself as the self-generation. But it's also okay to just visualize the wisdom beings descending and falling like rain into the self-generation directly. You can also do that. And so the self-generation in the context of this meditation is known as the Damtsik Tsempa, the commitment being. And those beings that you're inviting from the Pure Lands, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas of the directions, those are known as the wisdom beings. So these beings are invited, they settle at the crown, they absorb in the body, and eventually they mix with us until we ourselves as the deity and they themselves as the wisdom beings become inseparable, of one nature. So the Za is inviting, the Hum they settle, the Bam they dissolve, and with the Ho recited, they become inseparable, of one nature.
Oda sozo lashia te tembo do ta niba chiran roya de shela chiran do ta jise mo boyare.
So this kind of inviting and absorbing the wisdom beings into the commitment being is very important for stabilizing and blessing your deity yoga meditation, your self-generation.
Oda te damba te chawachi te koro koro shochi sernya do de wonduas.
And so we can add that dissolving of the wisdom beings into the commitment being as a possible seventh to the sixth outline.
Ta sozo lashia wa te tangi yoba noji tuka hone yunjo ge ze shochil chi. Ongla ono ke la pa do me ba chi den de sha.
And then another one visualization that we can add is a further empowerment to stabilize this visualization. And this also happens at the basis of the hum at the heart of oneself as Tārā. Light rays emanate, calling upon all of the empowering deities.
On lashia toni on ko te koro shochi sernya do de wonduas.
So this one is, we previously had this practice of dissolving the wisdom and commitment beings, and now at this point we are actually inviting the empowering deities to bestow the empowerment.
Ongla ringwa do jibashi to tejisheba tonje shita tejisheba kanga chi den de shita songas ongla.
Yeah.
Ongla do so shita sunya so sowata.
Yeah, so all of the empowering deities, the lineage Buddhas, and all of their retinues, they have kind of been invited in order to grant the empowerment, and now the empowerment is ready to be received. Ngakti kyo me parwa?
Ta ni no tsona o sawata danga ta tendi ge la te jika te tejisheba kanga ma pesa sona. Ta koros on je to kanga leka chiki mo yo
And then one recites a mantra, Om Sarva Tathagata Abhishekata Samaya Shriye Ahum, and it is on that basis that all of these various Buddhas and their retinue, these empowerment deities, they actually bestow the empowerment upon us. And so what we imagine is that actually the empowerment is bestowed using a vase filled with nectar. And that as these empowering deities sort of pour the nectar at our crown, that kind of slowly fills up our body from the bottom until it reaches sort of an overflow at the top. And that excess water, as it overflows from our head, it transforms into the principal deity of the lotus family, Amitabha. Yes. So Geshe said that different Tārā practices actually give a different deity from the overflow. Many give Amitabha, which we've seen here, but we sometimes also the overflow transforms into Buddha Mitrupa Dundrup, into Buddha Amoga Siddhi. Ridaki Jetapasana? Gen. Ale. Ale, konsanganso gen la tegre to us. And we imagine that as the empowerment is bestowed and as Amitabha manifests on the crown, Amitabha sort of manifests as a beautiful kind of ornament or jewel just in front of that top knot. And this also re-beautifies all of the jewels adorning Tārā. Riktak, yes. Yes. And so this Amitabha ornament, that appears on her crown, he's known as the sign of the lineage, right? It marks as a sign the lineage to which Tārā belongs. So it's a little bit like it marks her as a member of that, the Kandislagore Peme Rik Gitakta Wachirwa. So it marks her as a member of that sort of Padma lineage, and it's a little bit like the flag of a certain country. When you see the flag here, you're in Canada or whatever, so it marks Tārā as a part of that lineage. So now, having arisen as the deity and having gone through all of these meditations that sort of stabilize and empower the deity, now comes the time to make offerings, and in particular one is making offerings to oneself as the self-generation. So it's like inviting, once you invite a very honored guest, then you want to offer them nice things to eat and drink. The offerings that unfold here are a little bit like that. And so kind of to represent that as a physical action, many of us have the habit, for example, of filling water bowls as offerings at home. But an important thing to mention here actually is that if you're using physical offerings like this as a support in your practice of the sadhana, you want to actually dissolve those offerings into emptiness first and then re-offering them, right? And the reason is because in this aspect, right, they're contaminated worldly offerings, ordinary substances. We want to transform that. So we think like, okay, yeah, we've put these nice physical offerings out, and from that it can sort of arise pleasure or bliss maybe in a pleasant way, but it cannot bring forth the uncontaminated great bliss that we really want to be able to bring forth in the beings that we're offering to. And so for this reason, we need to transform these offerings into uncontaminated offerings. And so here, this is really important to remember, and it's in the context here of kind of blessing and purifying those offerings that we make to the self-generation. But this same awareness is very important when we make the offerings to the front generation as well. And so another thing too, that if one is in a circumstance where one is not able to kind of have direct physical offerings oneself, one can think of places where vast offerings are being made. So for example, in large monasteries like Sera, Ganden, Drepung, and so forth. And then on this basis, one can kind of dispel obstacles, purify, increase the offerings, and so forth. Yeah. And so Geshe said, maybe if you haven't visited some of those monasteries, he said, here we don't have something elaborate, but you can just think of the offerings that we make here as well, and that acts as the physical support. And so the sort of the purifying and the dispelling of obstacles for the offering, and then the generation of the offerings, when you have to generate the substances. Kewa. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. And then when we generate these offerings in terms of generating them in the visualization, we want to imagine that those offerings, they are appearing where we physically are as the meditator. So when we say sangwa, which is kind of like clearing or dispelling, which is the first part that Geshe mentioned, we have to understand that this is to dispel interferers, and interferers can manifest whenever offerings are made. So when we do, in the context of Tārā, this sangwa, this sort of clearing away or dispelling of obstacles, we imagine that from ourselves as Tārā, from our heart as a letter hum, countless light rays emanate. At the end of each light ray is a wrathful aspect of the Tārā deity who specializes in dispelling obstacles. And we can imagine that this chases away, this completely dispels any possible obstacle creators or interferers. And so then the next step is to jangwa, or to purify, and this purification is accomplished on the basis of recollecting emptiness. So we can think that they absorb or dissolve into emptiness, and then from this mind contemplating emptiness, from that sphere of emptiness, the offerings appear. And so when we generate the offerings from that sphere of emptiness, this actually happens in two steps. The first is the generation of the container, and the second is the generation of the contents. So Geshe is just going through the mantra. So when we say Om Amrita Kundali Hana Hana Hum Pe, this is the mantra where we visualize the chasing away of the obstacles or interferes. Om Sobawa Shuddha Sarva Dharma Sobawa Shuddha Hum. When we recite that mantra, this is the emptiness mantra, and then we say Tomba Ni Du Jur, which is everything is emptiness, right? This helps us recollect emptiness. And so Geshe said, really, to kind of make this contemplation of emptiness extensive, it's not just the offerings that are dissolving, but we can imagine if, like, the ordinary appearance of our house, whatever room we're in, that this dissolves as well. Think through emptiness, through absorbing this into emptiness. Any contaminations related to the samsaric environment and objects are completely purified. And so we imagine that from the sphere of emptiness, in the place just in front of where we are sitting, slightly raised up, are 7-letter drum. Brumre, drumre. Drum. 7-letter drums. Brum, brum, brumre. Yeah. And we can imagine that from those letter brums, there is the mind, the wisdom mind contemplating emptiness, arises in the aspect of the beautiful vessels, right, or bowls that are going to hold the offerings. So you don't need to be cheap or stingy and visualize the bowls as really small like this. You want to visualize the bowls as like really, really, really expansive that can fit all kinds of offerings inside. These offering vessels or bowls for the offerings, they're enough to contain all of the enjoyments required by sentient beings to sustain themselves. And then with so those 7 broom syllables give rise to these 7 vessels, and now we come to the actual substances. And so the offerings are generated on the basis of an which we can visualize at the bottom of each of these vessels or bowls. And then from those there arise within those bowls the various kind of offering substances, the beautiful water, the perfumed water, the lights, flowers, incense, food, and so forth. So there are 2 waters. One is kind of an ablution to wash the feet, and the other one is kind of a sprinkling to refresh the body.
다 연도를 짓더니 온보 줄 피해야 돼. 온보 줄.
And then the rest of the offerings, then je chagiredwa. Chuniyere.
작업만 됐더니.
Mari. That's a true.
전이 이제 로마도 집에서는 제로와.
Yeah.
로마도 파자.
Romate paja. Okay. Yeah. And so the remaining offerings are offerings to kind of please the various 6 types of sense consciousness and so forth.
그래서 다 온보 줄을 다 보게서 하면 그 대화 제바지시야 그래서
So we should have the awareness that having generated the vessels and the offerings within, these now possess the capacity to bring forth uncontaminated great bliss in the being to which I'm making the offering. And in addition to recollecting the offering's nature of uncontaminated great bliss, we should also think that the offerings are kind of inexhaustible. I forgot the word. Inexhaustible, right? They'll never run out. Yeah. And so then, so the idea here is that we don't just kind of make the offerings, right? We want to bless and increase them. Loso. So then Geshe said that, if you're doing the offerings more extensively, you would recite the offering verses. So argam, padyam, pupe, dupe, aloke, nuite, and also possibly shapta. But as you recite this, Geshe said, what you imagine is that lights emanate as you recite each of the offering kind of syllables, I guess. Lamo. And so as you recite the first one, right, which is an offering of water to refresh, you imagine that those light rays emanate out offering goddesses who present the offering to the deity, and in this case the self-generation. Yeah. And so Geshe said usually when we make offerings, right, we're doing that to the front generation, and so we emanate the offering goddesses outwards to make the offering to the front generation, but here we're making offerings to the self-generation, so I guess the goddesses kind of emanate out and they bring the offerings back to us. Yeah. So then padyam is the second type of water, the ablution. And now we finish the 2 preliminary water offerings, we come to the actual offerings. So pupe or pushpe is the flowers. So where are the flowers actually offered to the deity? They're actually offered on the crown. So then people might say, when you're offering the flowers, to what sense consciousness are you offering them? And usually we would think of the eye consciousness, but this could be mistaken. Yeah. Because when we encounter a flower, right, we first kind of react to its beauty using the eye sense, right? But actually we're offering it to the body consciousness. We offer the flowers to the body consciousness, and it's because they're being offered to the body consciousness that they're put on the head. So then you might have a question, well, if you're offering to the body, why do you place them on the head? Why is the head considered kind of representing the body? So the reason is actually that within our body, right, the main thing that can activate the refined states of bliss is the white drops, and actually the channel wheel that contains the white drops, the source is just kind of like below the crown, and it is for that reason that the flowers are offered there. So we're offering to the body consciousness, and the body consciousness is considered to be represented at the crown for the reasons that Geshe just stated. Dupe. Yeah. Dupe is incense.
the pite ta na yung bul phi yares.
And this is offered to the nose consciousness.
Deso wa.
Mhm.
Ane
Aloke,
aloke sana ta cheme phi yares.
dimikra, mikiwam.
Tila.
Ale. And so aloke is the butter lamps.
Ota te me go umbo tu no me go umbo ngine te ta deres.
And this is actually where we make the offering to the eye consciousness or to the eye sense sphere.
Oh, deso wa. Ane tane aloke tane ge de re.
Mhm.
Aloke ge de sana. I jo umbo phi yares.
And so the next gande karere
I
titamo.
jo umbo phi yares.
Mari ze karere.
Just to deal to got to
Tugato di Jimaya Begiji.
Yeah.
And so gande is a perfumed water, and this offering is actually said to be offered to the mental consciousness, and it's kind of sprinkled towards the center of the body.
Oh, that do no le koro je te ja. That do pa to got te so yares.
Yeah. So it's you kind of sprinkle it towards the center of the body,
Oh, so te ta yigel porque deva she ya I jo umbo phi yares.
and this is said to give rise to bliss in the mental consciousness.
That new de ser shila phi yares.
And then nuide represents offering food, di chelero,
Yo te chele se che no.
ro.
Je me ko na yo ba che umbo.
Chiwambo, yeah. And then this and then the food is offered to the tongue consciousness, right, to the sense of taste.
Oh, deso wa.
Uh.
Ta cha so so yin.
Shabda.
Shata ser ta da ter wa da.
And shabda is music, so this is an offering of sound.
Oh, ta te da te ta no ta ya na yo umbo wa.
And so this is offered to the ear consciousness. The Chachin, so you'll notice, those of you who are observant, that Geshe has done some of the mudras. They're different than what you're used to, because these are the mudras of Kriya Tantra, of action Tantra. So that's different than highest yoga Tantra.
Oh, ta no ji ta mo thobol yin de ba to la pan de so ya ma res.
Yeah.
Ta da ta sha ji la pa ni ma de ma ai san de so la res.
So the reason Geshe said for the difference, like when you make the offering like this and so forth, is because the offering goddesses in a lot of the highest yoga tantras, they have 4 arms. But in action tantra and kriya tantra, they only have 2 arms. So the differences in the mudras reflects that.
Oh, ge de te mo da wa ji ya re. Ka re ser la me do te ji la pa ni ko de so chu ya re.
Yeah. So because they have the extra arms, the highest yoga tantra deities, they can use the full 2 hands to make the whole thing, and they don't need a support.
La pa ji ya ro wa se ni mo ge talent chu ya ro wa.
Yeah. So they can hold the bowl or the basis of the offering with 2 of the hands, and then do a full mudra with the other 2 hands.
But da la pa ni ma de ma ai ji ge talent ga ji de so ya ro.
But in Kriya or Action Tantra, you have one that's holding the offering vessel, and the other that's kind of doing the mudra representing filling the offering.
Oh, ta te shin jo la cha wa de chi de ya re se ge je pa to sa ni bi chi de ge se ya re.
And so after those offering goddesses emanate out, make the offerings, we snap like this, and the offering goddesses actually absorb back into oneself.
Ta che wa phi ya de res.
Yeah. So that's the making of the blessing of the offerings and the making of the offerings. Yeah,
ni ka chi chi la mo no chi che ba cho o ma ya de sa pa re wa a go pa de ge de pi be de a lo ge de no sha da ta di zai so ga san phi ya de re.
Yeah. Now cukes.
A hu za la ba yin.
Yeah.
Ha ko so ta la.
Yeah.
Ta la a hu ma de ta di zai so ga me na.
Yeah.
Phi shi chen ji la pa res.
So Geshe is just saying that here the offerings are done a little bit, sometimes done a little bit extensively, and you'll actually have a verse for blessing the offerings, and then a verse for actually making the offerings. Jinjilapadi ahum yoreroa. Then puya pratitsaye soharwa. So when you just have the ahum at the end of each offering, so om argam ahum, for example, that's the blessing of the offering. Then when you have om argam pratitsaye soha, when you see that, that's the actual making of the offering, in the case that you have the 2 verses. To gawe nani nyongsho stabuchi. So pratitsaye soha is kind of means, if I understood Geshe correctly, it kind of means something like with a pleased mind, please experience or please enjoy the offering, something like that. Yeah, and jipa, so please partake, right? So partake kind of on an honorific word, where if you were offering something to an ordinary person, you would just say eat or enjoy. And then we close with a verse of praise to Tara, and the verse goes something like, Devas and Asuras bow their crowns at your lotus feet. O liberator from all misfortune, I prostrate to Holy Mother Tārā. Tārā.
다 소소 되지 조마를 시대요래. 다마 사회는 뒤서 그요라. 와스 또 소소 니깔했더니 또 이지요 바지.
Loso.
또 이들 오므타레서 다 거라잖아요 바지.
Yeah. And so here actually is where one does the mantra recitation. If one has done the self-generation, one can imagine that a mantra garland arises from the tam at one's heart, the mantra of the 10 syllables, Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha.
오므타레서 거라잖아요. 로요 바소노 또난 로요래. 디도 타야도 다 던지기 쳐봐. 그러 보게 레레 좋아하는 로요래.
And so Geshe said that actually you can visualize the Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha rotating chutsa double drogieres, chutsa le dok drogieres. Yeah, so it goes clockwise in this case. You can imagine them circling the letter tam clockwise, but you can also just recite Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha with the mantra garland remaining static. You can also visualize like that.
다 대를 거기를 홍세 막 돈이 또 비고 때냐서 지야 바다 건디 바치 뭐지 이따 가제 보고 와서 안에 드세게서 잡아봐만 뉴질랜드 소소가 다 디저 강가 봐줘와.
So also one can visualize, especially with the practices that we did to arise bodhicitta and wisdom, that as one recites the mantra, one has created the causes to receive blessings. Lights and nectars enter one's body, and we can imagine purifying any mental or physical difficulties, right?
Yes, what?
Di dache ma impek afro,
다 가디나 집
Yeah,
알아서.
ale, listen.
다 옴선 소소리인 링와 예서 소노 또 주요아래.
Yeah.
로망인네레이나. 이도도 다 설이나 아니 그 수투서. 다 옴세아지와로와.
Yeah.
다 옴세아데 소소 노지나 링와 예서.
Yeah. So the Om at the beginning of the mantra, we can consider this in two ways. It represents our ordinary body, speech, and mind, or it represents the holy body, holy speech, and holy mind of Venerable Tārā.
어디서 옴따레에서는 코코야 코와도 녀석을 등원을 줘.
Tare represents a liberation from the lower realms in particular and samsara in general.
옴따레 뜻따레 잘라바이나 단지바젤 조시베 단지바 니가 지바를 줘.
Tutare is considered to be representing liberation from the eight fears, especially the four connected with this world.
다 생기긴 지바도 다 lumbo치긴 지바도 다 던지긴 지바 뭐지 써요.
So some of these fears are like the fears of lions, the fears of elephants, so different, possibly destructive wild animals.
당연히 쇼비로지 뭐뭐야 다 가서 말했어.
And so this isn't just kind of some made up thing, but there's many stories where when this was recited, it was able to pacify these fears.
다 소소근 지바 간지지 손으로 또나르고 데려와쇼 같이 손으로 가서.
But here we can also really think any sort of fear, anything that's troubling or bothering you as you recite Tutare, you can imagine that it's cleared away.
떠레 옴따레 떠레 윤줄에서 왔어. 떠레 세아트 네라서 받아 던지고. 뭐야 바지 강가를 줘.
And so Ture represents different kinds of obstacles, more obstacles of the environment. So fears are obstacles related to like fires, floods, and so forth.
다 도나 지서 도마 소소 깨자만 무지 하고 살아.
Yeah.
도마 미가 지바 요조를 다파. 니가 지바 다도 지바서 너무들 가는 요조를 좋아하지 조로치.
So as we recite the mantra, it can be in the mood of a supplication or even a cry for help, right? Venerable Mother Tārā, please, as you promised, release me from all temporary and ultimate fears and obstacles.
당와서도 되는 대신 뭐지 할때 다 되지마 갈래 좀 하는 거 왔어.
And so as when you recite the mantra, there's also Soha Dromaso.
다 속았을 때 뭐지쇼.
Yeah, and so Soha at the end of the mantra is just the stabilizing. May all this come out well. And so Geshe was just explaining that we'll come to more explanation maybe tomorrow about different ways to visualize the mantra, because there's many different ways to do that.
당와서도 때라 할래인데서 뭐야 할래시도.
Actually, there's many different ways to meditate and visualize together with the mantra recitation.
다 개와 뭐하더래 좋아. 개완디 있는데도 아니 지서 도만도 전로와지 좀 알레바 대사란 개바쇼.
And so then we come to the end of the practice, which is a dedication of the merits, and it goes something like, through the merits of this meditation recitation, may I become Venerable Arya Tārā, and may I lead every migrator without exception to that state of Holy Tārā. And so Geshe said, in this way, we've given at least a very brief explanation of the meditation recitation of Arya Tārā. And so that concludes our activities for today. I think we made up for the lost time, but it also is a shorter session, so we'll end here. Yeah. And so Geshe said he does promise that he will give a full kind of commentary, a full explanation of the various ways to visualize when reciting the mantra. Yeah, Christmas couplet. So Geshe is referring you also, if you want more explanation, with the beauty of YouTube, you can look up Geshe's Tārā retreat, which, was that last Christmas holiday or the year before, Dave? It was so 2 years ago, the Tārā retreat. I think Geshe gave like 3 days of teaching, very extensive, on how to recite the mantra and visualize and everything. So that's available to you as well. And also he explained meditations related to the 3 concentrations, right? Abiding in fire, abiding in sound, and abiding in liberation at the end of sound. So those are all there very extensively. Yes, so check out our Lama Yeshe Ling Media YouTube page, and you can find all of those teachings. So Geshe said tomorrow is sort of the main event in the sense that it's this jenang, this permission initiation of Venerable Tārā, but hopefully with some of the information given today, right, that will make that more meaningful. Yeah. Jigdenji. Yeah. Ale. Wang sen ni mani gine su di ro chagu ina. Re. Yeah. So just to clarify something for those participating tomorrow, if you've previously received a full empowerment into any of the classes of Kriya Tantra, of Action Tantra, then by receiving the jenang for Green Tārā tomorrow, you'll be able to do the self-generation and the practice in the most full way. And Geshe said, but even if you haven't received those, it's still very beneficial to attend the jenang initiation tomorrow, because you receive powerful blessings of holy body, holy speech, and holy mind from Arya Tārā, and this will allow you to do the practice and visualizations just using a visualized Tārā at your crown or a visualized Tārā in front of yourself, so you can still really engage with the practice. So in what context are you saying that though, Dave? With the Bodhisattva vows. Ale, ko jenang ngane shuyela jangshub sempe dompa davo gogire duas matu jenjin pro. Yeah. So no, Dave just making the point that to receive the jenang fully, of course, you commit to take the Bodhisattva vows. But if you're not ready to do that, Geshe has said, you can just participate as a blessing. All right. Thank you so much. We shall leave it here, and hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow. A reminder that tomorrow is only going to be live stream, Zoom only for everybody. Yeah. So Geshe said also what was explained here in terms of the visualization, absorbing into emptiness, making the offerings, and so forth. All of this will be very similar for any deity that you practice. And so, maybe we'll see you, if you're local, in person tomorrow, and if not, hopefully on the live Zoom tomorrow. Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye. Go ahead. Sorry, we'll do a brief dedication. Jangshu Semjo Rinpoche Maje Panam Cheju Rechi Chewa Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Bewa Sho Toni Tawa Rinpoche Maje Panam Cheju Rechi Chewa Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Bewa Sho Jambe Bao Jidar Kyamba Da Kundu Zambo Deyan Dejente Deda Kungi Jesu Dalo Chir Gewa Dida Tamshe Rabdu Ngo Dusun Shebe Gyawa Tamshe Ge
Kudu Chochu Ngaba De Dagi Gewe Zawa Dikun Kyang Chochi Rabdu Ngowargi.
Zawa Kandi, Chisayo in the Tini Bala Tinita, Moge Matu Neala Supata, Kandi Jina, Kanga Kanga Pashawachi.
So through all of the roots of virtue that we have accumulated, may all of the wars, diseases, and other calamities manifesting in this world be completely cleared away.
It's a domicta, because you took a shalala tenita, so Mangamba Madu, that's the Sayina and Rory to so Mangamba Panjawan, so much watch Pasheta.
Through the blessings of the holy body, holy speech, and holy mind of Venerable Arya Tārā, may any beings possessing evil thoughts have these evil thoughts completely cleared away and be able to give rise to thoughts of loving kindness. May the sun of happiness shine on all 6 types of sentient beings within samsara without differentiation. Okay, so we'll end it there. so we'll end it there, and yes, just a reminder, the initiation starts at noon tomorrow. So if you're coming in person or coming on Zoom, it's at noon tomorrow Eastern Time.
What I said to say, I did near the sales sell and Monday that that's a Jesus.
So Geshe said that if you remember the key points today, starting with the refuge, the bodhicitta, and so forth, up to the self-generation and the making of offerings, if you keep those in your mind, that's going to help you understand sort of any sadhana practice that you do.
Why are you change this?
So we'll close it there. Take care, everybody. Yeah. Thanks.